Hi, and welcome to an episode of the Jet Rails podcast. I'm Robert Rand, your host. Today, we're going to be talking about site search and navigation. You get to an e-commerce website or any website for that matter, and if it's of any size, if it's an online store and it has any sort of product assortment, any sizable catalog, you're going to want to be able to find what you're looking for. And whether that's by going through categories and search filters and such, or whether that's by using the search box and trying to find what you're looking for. It's going to be crucial. Right now, there's a lot of retailers and other businesses getting into e-commerce for the first time, and some of them are well-established businesses with with some real catalogs that they need to work with. There's other businesses that we know are seeing a major uptick in their e-commerce channels because other sales channels are not as accessible to consumers right now. And so we're going to be chatting all about it. I've got Thomas Turley with us today from, I want to say from Nextopia, but I now have to say from Searchspring, from my good friends at Searchspring. Yep. So now I don't have to be friends with one or the other publicly anymore, right? I can admit that.
Yeah, exactly.
I've been going behind both of your backs all this time. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to play best friends with both of us. But yeah, for those who don't know me, I'm Thomas Turley. I'm the head of partnerships here at Searchspring, but was formerly head of partnerships at Nextopia. So I come from the Nextopia side of the coin previous to the merger that we had on February 4th. But yeah, now you can be friends with both of us openly and not be held accountable for it by either one of us. So yeah, if you catch yourself slipping into calling us Nextopia, we won't hold you to it.
Well, I'm sure I still have some Nextopia socks somewhere, so I'll say vintage at some point. But for now, but I'll try to keep it Searchspring. How has the merger gone? Is the dust settled at this point?
Yeah, I mean, we picked a great time to merge a company. Obviously, we didn't see what was coming down the road, but the merger's been going well. I mean, while we publicly did it February 4th of this year, I think it's February 4th. There'd been plenty of work ahead of time. For those that don't know, Searchspring had been acquired April last year, 2019. Nextopia June or July 2019. And then there was a whole load of stuff going on in terms of restructuring, mainly the executive positions, but and the decision to merge had obviously been decided a few months before February 4th. So while the public kind of got to know what had happened February 4th, we'd been working on it in the background, marketing teams and getting ready for the PR stuff. We've obviously had to do a lot on the tech in the background to make sure it was ready for the merger. Marketing teams doing a rebrand of the Searchspring side, and inevitably us on the partnership side having to prepare and get ready to kind of bring people across the Searchspring program or at least talk to the people on the Nextopia program and inform them of what's going on. So, I mean, while February 4th was kind of the date that everyone found out, we've been putting a lot of graft in months before. To be honest with you, if we're being completely honest with you, especially from partnerships and biz dev type of side, we were over prepared. We were ready to go. We're just like, we want to.
I expect you to lie to me throughout this entire podcast. I mean, that's what our friendship is predicated on. Right?
Absolutely.
But you, I mean, I would not have pegged you as a guy that could keep a secret from me. We've been drinking, I know how to loosen your tongue. Like, you really did a great job of keeping this one a surprise.
Well, they had to keep me locked in a cage somewhere, so I didn't tell anybody for a few weeks. One of the funnier things was we merged on February the 4th, and I think we were doing the .ski event February 5th, and we'd sponsored it as Nextopia. So I think we might have been the first company to have changed the company during an event that we were sponsoring. So that was a fun little extra thing to wiggle around for me anyway during that time. But yeah, it was definitely tough for me not to go out and blurt it to the world. You know what I'm like. I like to chat a lot to all of our partners and friends in the industry. So that was the hardest part for me. Was definitely
good. Well, while we're talking about secrets and surprises, I mean, you merged with a direct competitor. What did you learn?
Yep.
Did you find out things that surprised you, or that were a little unexpected?
Yeah.
Once you got under the hood?
They were always, let's be honest, let's call a spade a spade. They were always our number one competitor. They're always our most comparable competitor. And between Searchspring and Nextopia. And we always thought that we were similar. We didn't realize just how similar we were in terms of obviously products and market and what have you, but more in terms of just personality type, structure of the organization, in terms of positions. Even if you want to think about it, Nextopia was based in Toronto and still is, the people that were from there. And Searchspring predominantly is in Colorado and Denver. Those two cities have got pretty similar similarities despite being in different countries. So there was a lot of similarities that we really were kind of amazed by in terms of company size and people inside. And I mean, yeah, even during the initial meeting, some of the older guard, I guess, if you want to call them that, it was almost like I don't want to call it a family reunion because that sounds kind of cliche, but there was a lot of trading of stories and previous meetings at trade shows and previous kind of clients that we'd worked with and kind of trading war stories, I guess. So it was all positive. We did do in-person meetings in Denver and in Toronto. So it was very much a friendly atmosphere. We'd been friendly foes for a while. And now,
I'm glad you got to do that while you could still get on airplanes and make those kinds of things happen. Probably good timing in that sense.
Exactly.
Yeah. How are the products coming together? I mean, because these are pretty similar in a lot of ways. I mean, obviously different code bases and some different approaches to things. But, if I wanted to think about it this way, are Searchspring customers becoming Nextopia customers on the Nextopia platform or vice versa? Or is it really a merging of features, together? What's the prognosis long-term for the product itself?
Sure. And I mean, I guess this was a major portion of what we were doing ahead of the official merger announcement is there was a bunch of executives brought in. Obviously, the new CEO, Peter Masana, but also a big portion was our CTO, Will Warren, who has experience previously in search. He's worked with Endeca and some other companies as well. And he was really the spearhead of getting the two development teams together, getting the two products, looking at the two products and figuring out what exactly we're going to do here. It's an unenviable task, I must admit. And I mean, we have double the resources now, which is a good thing. We had a development team for the Searchspring side and a development team from the Nextopia side that we've merged. And we really looked at what is the most scalable option for us moving forward now that we have twice the resources, now that we have all of these people and we're aggressively trying to grow the position. And so we ultimately decided that the Searchspring platform is going to be highly scalable in a position in the future. We're concentrating a lot on the merchandising and personalization side of things, but we're not forgetting Nextopia that still exists. It's still a product. I mean, if we're going to talk end of lives, it's a contentious subject depending on which platform you're using. There is no end of life for the Nextopia product. We have the customer success team is still very much supporting it. The dev team is very much still maintaining code and servers and actually improving it and patching it. So there is no real end of life here. People that were on Nextopia will still remain on Nextopia, and Searchspring will be kind of the one that we're moving forward with in terms of new business. But
now, I promised people when we opened this episode, we were going to talk about site search and navigation. And I mean, they've heard so much about end-of-life software from us.
I don't want to add to the whitewash of end of life.
No, that's awesome. But that is, I mean, that's commendable because I think, we've all seen mergers and acquisitions in the industry where usually they go best, where clients don't really feel like they're cannon fodder. Where they can continue to live on in a healthy way. And whether there's rebranding, whether there's additional resources available, again, I think it's commendable to make sure that you put customers first and you don't make them jump through hoops. Yeah. And so
I think from the Nextopia side, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, I'm wondering, are there any discernible or noticeable changes for the customers as of now or planned? I guess if they've been on Searchspring, maybe something from the Nextopia stack is going to come into play for them and become available to them, or vice versa for those that have been historical Nextopia users.
Yeah, so I mean, from the Nextopia side, the only real difference you're going to see or notice is that the logo in the top corner now says Nextopia or Searchspring company. That's it. Uh, you're still talking with the same customer success reps. You still have the same access to support, and it's the same on Searchspring side as well. In terms of what the future holds and if there's any notable differences, I think overwhelmingly the feedback's been positive from clients and also partners that ultimately are dealing with this as well. Again, like I spoke about earlier, we've effectively doubled our engineering teams. We now have 2 teams that are able to combine and figure out the roadmap. And whether that means porting over some of the most popular products from the Nextopia platform, building out completely new functionality based on the feedback from our customers, from partners. But ultimately, there's not a huge amount of functionality that was necessarily that Nextopia had that Searchspring didn't, or vice versa. And really, it enables us to put the client first and figure out which is the best fit. There's some clients on Nextopia that will want to remain on Nextopia. There may be some that we think are a better fit for Searchspring. And if they do, we're not by any means going to push them onto that. But if they are a better fit, we are in a position to be able to kind of work with them on that. But really, it comes down. We've managed to double down on customer success, on development, on engineering. So it's really put us in a position to scale and really build out functionality that is needed by the market itself and as it changes.
That's part of the benefit of merging together 2 companies that have long histories and success. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's some skeletons back there in my closet that, I'm not going to tell anybody about on this particular episode. But in general, that's an easier way to go, that these are known quantities. Would you say that the target audience has stayed the same? Because like you say, that these are 2 companies that were really pretty head on in terms of the audience and who you were selling to over the years.
Yeah, I mean, and again, even before I spoke, the companies were very similar in the way they were made up, but also the way they were founded. Whether it be Gareth, the original founder and CEO of Searchspring, or Sanjay on the Nextopia side, they both kind of have very similar origin stories and upbringing, and had very similar kind of ways that we're going. I think one of the benefits of working through this merger is it kind of allowed us to get out of the weeds a little bit and kind of really think about what our market is, where it's progressing, and how we need to adjust, whether it be from a marketing side or product side, to best serve that. Obviously, the market's changing. Nextopia and Searchspring are almost well over a decade old at this point. What was initially their customer when Nextopia or Searchspring both started is not probably the customer right now. This was very much we're in a different kind of world. We're different markets from where we were 10 years ago. And so it's allowed us to really sit back and think, okay, so which part of the market do we serve? Who's our user at the end of the day? Because I think when Nextopia and Searchspring first started, it was a lot more of the store owner was also a developer who probably had a custom ASP.NET storefront or something similar to that, and needed a development tool to kind of basically concentrate on the search side. What we're seeing now with the kind of new market with things like eCommerce and Shopify and more user-friendly platforms is you don't necessarily need the owner to be the marketer, to be the developer, to be everybody else. And our market is really much more marketers and merchandisers, and overall we need to adjust where we're aiming towards serving to make sure it's a much more user-friendly platform, that search is part of the tool belt, but that we are able to provide solutions that enable merchandising strategies to be carried out as a whole on the website, and obviously intermingle with the new platforms that have come along with your BigCommerces, your Shopify's, compared to what was maybe the case 10 years ago with some other platforms and custom builds. So it did allow us to kind of really kind of take account of like, what's our business, who are we targeting, and we really do fit well in that mid-enterprise level, if you want to call it. And that's a big change as well. I mean, you have to remember that 10 years ago, Nextopia and Searchspring were basically selling what they could and to who they could, and with no project too small or too big. We're in a great position now where we can be very specific of building out the product and also who we're targeting, and make sure that we're really gearing it towards that market rather than just taking anything that comes our way.
And it's a growth market. I mean, e-commerce grows every year. There's more players to potentially need services like yours, like ours. I mean, that's, I guess, a net benefit to the industry that we found ourselves in, even right now, in what overall is a down market. There's certainly a lot of businesses in e-commerce that are seeing significant growth. So, and in many cases, a bigger percentage seeing growth than any retraction in market share or in demand. So, you, it's interesting. Would you say that there are particular strengths that you've been trying to retain through this process? Because I know that can be challenging. That each team sort of has certain ways of doing things, certain systems, processes. At the same time, there's some newer combined leadership, and so sometimes that opens up floodgates to ideas and to evolution, and that really things that you've wanted to do now you finally can. There's all these different paths. I know you mentioned that the engineering team is now combined and bigger than ever. Are there other facets to sort of retaining core strengths between the companies?
Yeah, and I mean, I think Peter, our new CEO, was very clear from day one. This is two teams coming together. This is not one absorbing the other. This is not anything like that. And we've managed to keep everybody, apart from obviously the original CEOs, at the company. And I think he's been very clear from day one, myself excluded, that people are the main strength of this company from both sides, and that people are going to continue to be the one that drive it forward. Despite the founders leaving, there's still a vast amount of experience within the company. From the Nextopia side, I mean, he's going to hate me for mentioning his name. Chris Bannister's been doing it for 19 years. I think he's employee number 2. Wow. Christian, who's on the development side, was employee number 3, so not long after Chris. And from the Searchspring side, I think our VP of integrations, James, has been doing it for 10 years now. Chantel, the VP of partnerships, has been doing it for 9. So there's a lot of industry knowledge, a lot of strength, a lot of just good people that have been put together here, and it's really a combining of strengths, not a change or deviation. So I think that's been the clear message from day one, that the people within the organization are the strength of the organization, and we're continuing to do that. We are adding people to it rather than taking people away.
Well, and if you cover your ears for a second, I'll just tell everyone that you're definitely an asset, and glad to see that that you've been helping through the transition between the companies. But it's okay. I'm not going to give you a chance to argue with me about it, because I know that you will.
I guess my fishing for compliment work there.
Yeah. Well. Okay. Well. Let's talk about where you're failing. Right. Are you still catching yourself calling the company Nextopia, even though the branding is now really Searchspring?
All the time. I'm not going to lie. It's what do they say about old dogs? They can't learn new tricks. It's still tough for me to. It's usually in emails. I catch myself starting with the N, and I'm like, nope, delete, Searchspring. And I mean, like I said, there's some guys that have been here for 10 plus years.
It's like you have to train your dictionary to autocorrect, that Nextopia should be spelled Searchspring.
Yeah, exactly. I've just had to add some synonyms in my email. But yeah, I mean, back when we were all allowed in the office together, it was very much a fun game of catching people saying it on the phone and calling them out. But yeah, I mean, we still are Nextopia. This Nextopia still exists for customers. We still have to talk about it, but yeah, it's I always catch myself calling it Nextopia, shortly followed by formerly Nextopia.
Yeah. So both teams, one you mentioned in Canada, one in the US, because you've now, your teams had already started to work together remotely from 2 different countries, let alone cities. Did you find that was helpful to transition, given what's going on? That I know that for all of us in tech, that transitioning to remote is relatively easy compared to other industries, but I'm guessing that you probably had a leg up because your teams were now used to working apart from each other.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely helped. Has it been frictionless? No. No, it's never going to be. This is unprecedented. And I think there's always going to be things, but I mean, in terms of context, we've had a pretty easy ride of it. Ecom tech is pretty much a stable internet connection and a computer, and you're good to go. Not as simple as that, but in terms of context, it is. I will say that, yeah, having to kind of merge the two remote teams, or even three remote teams if we're being specific, because the Scaleworks team is in Texas, is it did help, because Nextopia predominantly had all been in the one office in Toronto, and I'd probably come accustomed more than most to just running down the hallway if I needed things. So having that kind of 9-month, 12-month period of getting ready, and learning to adapt to this remote work. I mean, Chantal, my VP, is based in Colorado, so the CEO is based in Texas. So you do have to adapt to it. So it did mean it was a lot easier when this did happen for us to go and work remotely, compared to maybe even what would have happened if it happened last year when we were at Nextopia and we were all in one organization, one building. But I mean,
I imagine it's probably good timing for a merger in that sense, that now you've got some combined resources. And so with whatever's coming your way right now, good, bad, or otherwise, I know that some of the efficiencies that come out of that, and just some of the extra tools and hands on deck can really come in handy in situations like these.
For sure. Yeah, I think during the merger, big focus was on making sure we're all using the same tech stacks, not in terms of Searchspring or Nextopia, but actual tech stacks that we work on. So, I mean, a big shout out goes to Slack, G Suite, Zoom, those type of companies. They make this a hell of a lot easier than it would have been, let's say, 5, 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, it's easy for us to all pick on companies like Zoom that are going through, such tremendous growth right now, and use cases that they really weren't, where everyone's having family get-togethers, throughout the week on Zoom in ways that weren't happening before. Schools, without a lot of procedure historically for these things getting into it. But, for folks like us, this is how we survive. I've been remote for a couple of years.
It's definitely not a hard transition. I know there's some more traditional companies out there that it's been a real tough situation to try and move home into an at-home work space, and even having to rush into tech stack choices. I mean, we already had these established, and it's kind of weird to see after so many years of using Zoom for business that all of my friends and family are now using it for kind of pleasure, basically, and using it for keeping in contact with one another. But yeah, I mean, it's been pretty easy. I think we're blessed with ecom tech that it really is not too difficult to work remote. I think this may, if you want to see silver linings, this may kind of impact how companies are run in a more lean sense, in a grander scope of things moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we can have some net improvement, whether it's economically, environmentally, whether it's just, mental health and well-being, for folks that have a long commute, skipping that once in a while, even if it's not a constant, even, of course, hopefully we're all looking forward to more meetings. I know you and I are used to seeing each other throughout the year at trade shows, grabbing a pint. This is a very different experience for us. But, I did promise we were going to get to talk a little bit about, site search and nav and things that the companies do, not just some of the operational sides. So, let's start off with a transitional question here. If I had to ask you, what's changing in the market? What are you actually seeing in terms of merchants out there, what they need, your actual customers, as well as any changes to deal flow and requests from the e-commerce community? What's going on out there in the world?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, there's some very short-term changes, and then there's obviously long-term changes that were happening prior to the COVID-19 stuff. In terms of the short-term stuff, I think there's a lot more appreciation of having to personalize website experience and really working on that CRO side of stuff. I think people have now more than ever, now that pretty much everyone's forced to go online or not do anything at all, that you're going to have to create a really usable experience for your retailers online, whether it comes from search, navigation, just generally in terms of user experience. you really need to stand out from the pack. And I think traditionally that was always that was a luxury only afforded to the really, really big retailers. You had to have teams build that stuff out. And you'd have to have a lot of resources to put into it. I think with platforms like Shopify and BigCommerce out there, even Magento, making it a lot easier to do so. But in terms of from us on a CRO standpoint, we've noticed that search has obviously become a little commoditized over the last few years. There's plenty of apps out there, start like from nothing to thousands of dollars per month, and it can become a little bit of a checkbox item. And really, what we've seen is that search, while we're very good at search and search is in our name, it's a core proponent of a much larger tool belt that affects merchandising, personalization, and just being able to provide a tailored experience site wide that matches the business goals as a whole. I think it's all well and good having a functioning search and bringing back relevant items, but if it doesn't match what you're trying to do as a business, or if it doesn't match what you're doing elsewhere on the site, there's inconsistencies there that will ultimately lead to a kind of a less than ideal customer experience. So I think people are really concentrating on the customer experience as a whole on site. There's a lot of transition going on right now. I mean, there's certain industries that are getting a huge boost. I think most people can attest that food and drink has been up on the rise in terms of what's been getting a lot more traffic and a lot more
absolutely
focus.
People want to order that stuff online, and they're stocking up on things, and so absolutely, we're seeing quite a few categories ourselves. Anything unusual come across your desk?
Unusual, no, but things I like to see, I guess. It's a couple of our customers are getting some real influx. I mean, DK Oldies, there's been a lot of Nintendo 64 consoles and retro gaming as a nerd. It's kind of cool to see that people are getting a little creative in terms of passing the time there. I think I actually moved apartments during this whole pandemic, which, by the way, I don't advise. It was not planned, and it was not enjoyable, but people like Jamestown distributors are selling a lot of paint. I think people, those DIY projects and those home improvement projects that have been put off for maybe years are now being taken under control. I know I've done about 6 months worth of DIY in this place, and I've only been here for about a month. So there's definitely trends there of beyond the kind of what you'd expect to see in terms of food and drink and stuff like that. We've also seen, and again, this isn't anything indicative of macro trends. This is just what we're seeing, is that pet products have come extremely more popular lately. I think there's been a lot of funny stories of whether your pet thinks you've been fired because you're at home all the time, and is waiting to get its own time back. But people have been investing in pet products a lot more. I think there's a lot more people now focusing on that as well. So there's been a lot of trends. Again, they can't necessarily be indicative of the macro environment, but there's been some definitely interesting things happening from that perspective.
Yeah, every week I've been surprised by some data point of something that and most of the time it's logical. It's not that I don't stop and say, well, why is that? It's like, oh, I wouldn't have thought of that. Like, if I was an investor, I wouldn't have thought that many steps deep. And I think of myself as a strategist, but people were going to be shopping for that item in droves. And so taking a step back, when I think of what a team like yours does for a website, I usually use analogies that have to do with brick and mortar. And so I talk about things like, hey, look, somebody shows up at the retail store and they're looking for something in particular. They're going to ask a sales clerk, hey, do you carry X, or where can I find it? Sure. And if that person says, no, we don't have it, or it's on aisle 12 when it's really on aisle 6, well, you probably just lost a sale, might have lost a long-term shopper that way who won't come back to you because they just, don't believe that you've got what they need. Poor user experience. And similarly, when it comes to things like some of that merchandising, helping people to filter down and figure out, which of these products meets their needs. Is it going to be if they carry 100 products in a category, which one is going to be applicable to what they're trying to address, what they're trying to solve. And so getting all that kind of stuff right, just like you would try to do for shoppers if they were interacting with a real person in a store, and just the same way that you want to merchandise in a real store, that you put the milk in the back of the store so the shopper has to walk all the way around to the back
Yeah.
and past some other things. You put the impulse buys up front at the checkout, that all this stuff, has involved psychology and testing and things for decades. And so I like to think of a tech stack like what your team brings to the table as addressing the digital version of that, really helping shoppers to find what they're looking for more comprehensively, more effectively. What does that actually look like behind the scenes? Is it a few different things that really are at the heart of the technology, that when you spin up a basic e-commerce site just aren't part of that your team really adds to the stack and helps these sites to address? What is it that you find is the biggest value prop?
Ultimately, what we're trying to do is provide an array of tools that really gives the power to the merchandisers and the marketers and the store owners to create that personalized experience to their clients when they're coming online, to their customers when they're coming online, much like you would with an in-person store, making sure that not only that you're providing a great customer experience when people are looking for things, i.e. searching for things, and that you're bringing back relevant items so that when someone's asking for shoes, you don't show them the t-shirts.
Or when they're searching for brown shoes and the manufacturer called them mocha, they're searching for, I don't know, teal or turquoise, and the manufacturer called it aqua, and now you've got to get them what they're looking for.
Yeah, and I mean, there's actually a good article that our CEO just wrote, with the kind of differences of what really needs to have that human touch and what you need to have automated. There's a lot of in the industry now. I think AI is obviously the big term. It was machine learning before that. There's big data if you're going back years and years, and it's quite easy to hide behind, here's an algorithm, let it figure you out. Well, that's not really the case. What makes each store different is the way that it's been built, and the kind of the culture behind it, and the way that the people interact on it. So while there is certain pieces and algorithms that we put in place that just handle things that should make sense, like you said, making sure that when you're searching for brown shoes come back. If people misspell things, and just generally having like our contextual search algorithms that make sure that it understands intent and understands what you're trying to search for and brings back relevant items, while also adding a layer of machine learning that is helping you push items that are more likely to convert from those searches. There's also what the really kind of focus of Searchspring, and what differentiates us, is we're enabling you to take control of the whole merchandising of the store, from homepage to cart page to collection categories and searches, and really provide you a suite of user-friendly tools that allow you to take power, or gives you power to basically control that the way that you want to control it. Make sure that you're not only bringing the right things to them, but the things that you want to show to your customers. Make sure that you're aligning it with the company as a whole and what your business goals are, and adjust merchandising tactics and strategies within the Searchspring platform. So then it's shown on a wider scale across your site, so that you basically have control over that user experience and are providing that tailored, personalized end product to anybody that's on your site. And I think now more than ever is we're seeing a lot more people understanding that you need to have that there's no one size fits all to approach, especially with everybody coming online. There's a lot more people in the market, and you really do need to stand out from a CRO standpoint and from a just general customer experience standpoint. And that's really what Searchspring aims to do, is it gives you the power to have control over all of that, while also taking care of the stuff that often can be tedious and time consuming, whether it be on default platforms or some other platforms as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I guess it just comes down to conversion rate optimization. That again, and if you've got a sizable catalog, if you've got, I'd suppose, at least hundreds of products, maybe thousands of products, and you want users to be matched up with the right things, whether it's what they're searching for, or you're just looking at intent. You're looking at data to say in an automated fashion what's most likely to generate a sale here today, using historical data to generate that. It's going to be big. So obviously, everyone always wants to have, I would hope, a better conversion rate. Everyone always wants to generate more sales off the traffic that they have, and larger sales, bigger average order volumes, better customer experiences that drive people back to the store. Are you seeing users hold off on adding on a product like yours right now, a service like yours? Are you seeing more people flocking in, looking for solutions to improve their conversion rates right now? Is it pretty much the same mixed bag that a lot of us are seeing in the industry?
Um, yeah, I mean, if there's one word that I'm probably sick of hearing by now, it's the word pivot. I think everybody is using the word pivot to basically describe what they're trying to do right now. And I think one thing I'm seeing, and again, everybody may have differing opinions, but I think the main difference right now is there's no middle ground. There's basically one side of the spectrum where people are like, okay, this is our time to just invest in new things and really strategically change what we're doing here and take maybe a little bit of a risk, add new things, change the way the business is operating. And then there's also the other side of the spectrum where it's okay, we need to hold what we have. We may need to get a little leaner in terms of the way we're operating and be more efficient with the way that we're running this organization. And I'm not saying that either is better or worse. I think there's just no kind of middle ground right now. I think sitting on the
when
fence
you're in
right
a market that's in turmoil, I think that's prudent. That's reasonable. That I don't think anyone in e-commerce can predict exactly what the landscape will look like in 3 months or 6 months. Even though a lot of businesses are up, a lot of what we do has to do with natural market forces. What's unemployment look like? What how confident are buyers in the market to go out and spend money on things? And there's a trickle effect. So we're not necessarily the first ones to feel it. First it's the end users, the shoppers, what have you. Then the merchants that aren't seeing sales and aren't seeing normal patterns, and then things move to us. And I think the data, while I've been seeing, again, a lot of things that give me a lot of reasons to feel really good about the e-commerce market in general, and a lot of, the averages, the medians, the means, everything looks really, really healthy right now. And projections look pretty good from the folks that I talk to. I think there is an amount of that every company right now, regardless of who they are, what they're doing, Google is going to slow down hiring. So, I think that
when they're doing
we're all supposed to.
An indicator.
Yeah, that there are market indicators that there's going to be flux, and that we all have to do what we're supposed to do to help make sure that we're going to be effective.
And I think
it's unprecedented.
Yeah, and I think it was the CTO of Shopify that mentioned they're basically dealing with Black Friday levels of traffic every day right now.
Yeah,
which is anybody.
We have a lot of customers like that right now, where as their web host, it's funny that we're out there trying to volunteer and help, and through different initiatives, different things, public service announcement, right? offline-to-on.com. I'll add other links to the show, as I've been doing with recent shows. But if you do know a merchant that needs help right now, there are folks in the industry that want to help, and so we always want people to know about resources like that. But on the flip side, there are users that are seeing record growth, and on the hosting side, for instance, they need more load testing and load balancing and scalability and elasticity, and they need to be able to handle whatever's coming their way, because they've got products that are in demand, and people just keep refreshing the site waiting to see when there's more available or whatever's going on. Obviously there are lots of tech companies right now that that have very particular needs. And e-commerce is one of those categories. So it's about meeting in the middle in some ways, about how do we take care of the folks that are seeing record growth, and every day is the best day of the year for them, and how do we not leave behind the folks that are hurting and that are just trying to, and especially I think more than anyone, the omni-channel businesses are the businesses that were primarily brick and mortar. They were primarily retail or wholesale or distribution or manufacturing or something else that wasn't putting a majority of their business through an e-commerce channel.
For sure, yeah, and I think we're finding a lot of that too. It's a lot of the traditional physical retailers are now like, they may have had an e-com store, they had an online presence, but it wasn't really a focus. It's now like, okay, this is a drastic change that we're going to have to adapt to, and how do we keep up? And yeah, we're seeing a lot of kind of, if we want to talk about first time e-com users, well, we're not seeing guys that are coming straight brand new online, from no sales um, to sales online. What we are seeing a lot of is people that are traditionally pretty successful retailers from a brick and mortar standpoint now needing to get online quickly. And I think some of the stuff you guys are doing is great for helping with that. In terms of offering advice, I know there's been some people. I think Karen at Shipper HQ has definitely been very vocal about helping people.
Yeah, in comparison, I don't think that we can really take a bow over here. I don't think that's why we're doing anything that we're doing anyway. Karen and her team have put a phenomenal resource over at Shipper HQ into offline to on and getting that up and running. There are other initiatives that we have other partners and other companies involved with. One of my coworkers, Tom Pachalski, has put together an initiative, that it's meant to help businesses that are already established and up and running in e-commerce, but they're dealing with different challenges. They need to get effective curbside pickup set up. They need to deal with, with increased site traffic. You name it, whatever's coming their way. They need a little love. They need to downsize something or upsize something, and we're still running into. See, here it comes, Magento 1 end of life.
And there's it.
Yeah, well, because the playing field, the chessboard, it's in play. That there are pieces moving, and things are becoming more real for a lot of people. So it's a conversation that we're having on a daily basis. And we're continuing to bring resources to the market to help merchants get through that transition of Adobe stopping with their release of patches for Magento 1 and everything that happens then, whether it's about security or it's about PCI compliance or just about having a merchant processor that'll run credit cards for you.
Yeah, I mean, stress is going to be at an all-time high regardless of what you're doing right now.
That's right.
So, I mean, one end of life is going to be stressful regardless. It's going to be more stressful just because of outside factors. But again, people are there is a real spirit in the industry, I think, of just getting through it and helping one another out. I mean, from our perspective, we've set up an e-com alliance where it's there's just no pitching. It's not anybody trying to sell anything. It's just bringing merchants and partners and everyone together on a Slack channel to be able to contribute and offer advice and suggestions and ask questions.
And sometimes I think that's most of what people need. It's just routing people to the right resource. It's getting an answer. Every day is a different day here, where we get asked about things about GDPR. And, keeping in mind the businesses are still operating, that, just because, commercial airlines aren't taking people on tourist trips in the same ways or other things, doesn't mean that all business has stopped or that things aren't flowing. And so we find that, if we can just help, and that's, I think, a lot of what this podcast is about. I mean, without trade shows, I know folks like you and I are staying quite busy, regardless, because there's a need for communication, for thought leadership, for valuable information, not just complete sales pitches, which are lovely, but that's not always what people need. Giving people information so they can make informed decisions themselves. Very interesting, and I know that we're all getting into more and more Slack channels. It feels like by the day that, that they can be a little bit consuming, but, we want to leverage our Rolodexes, I guess, for good. I mean, once in a while I think about for evil, but it just doesn't wear well with me.
Yeah, just sit at your desk and figure out who you can use for evil. But I mean, yeah, I think one thing I've loved about this industry from day one is I think everybody, regardless of whether they're competitors, whether they're partners, whatever, is everybody's very inclusive and willing to help and offer advice, and share stories of how they've done things. So Tom, more than most, I think, in the industry, I will give him a a special shout out. I think he'd probably give the shirt off his back to anybody in the industry to help them out. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely in a different format than what we're used to. The trade shows has been a big hit from the partnership side. I think we obviously in partnerships rely on those human interactions and face to face. And I mean, I'm beyond distraught that I won't be able to do be able to attend the Jet Rails party in Chicago this year.
I've had to go out and buy my own maple syrup. Do you know how long it's been since I had to buy maple syrup? I mean, your team always brings it, IRCE or whatever other shows. Like you've got me covered.
Yeah,
the little things in life.
I don't think I'm going to quite be able to. Yeah, I don't think I'm quite going to be able to do a cigar and rum tastings here on my own. But yeah, your party was definitely one of the highlights every year. So.
Well, Tom, I mean, our Tom gets a lot of credit for that. I may help with the invite list a bit, but we have some hardworking folks, right from the top of the company down that put a lot of effort into that. And, our goal with that, and it started before I got here, but has always been to take time with the people that we work with, whether they're clients, whether they're partners, whether they're folks that we're just starting relationships with, and to get some real face time with them. Because we know, when you're at some convention center and you've got, thousands of people floating around, it's hard to slow down and having more meaningful conversation. People are just trying to make it through an expo hall. So sure. Setting up an environment where we can do that. And I know it's not that Jet Rails are the first or only to come up with that kind of a game plan, but that it's been a healthy way for us to do it. And also knowing that, as nice as it is to have a booth at various events, and not that we don't do that from time to time when the world's not upside down. But there are a limited number of people that come to a trade show hoping to pick a new web host. When they come to an e-commerce trade show, they probably want to learn about, new technology that they can integrate and other things, not necessarily to make an infrastructure change. They're more likely to be talking about a new site that they want to build, finding an agency, finding other technology. And they'll figure out they'll come to research the hosting later on once they have some of those other things in order. So we try to be logical and creative about it. I know. I mean, nobody would assume that from me, but
yeah, for sure. I mean, trade shows. I think, yeah, they were having to get creative anyway, because I think the market's changed a lot and there's just a lot.
There's so many of them
going on, but. Yeah, there's just back in the day, it used to be okay. You go to IRC once a year, and that's your big haul. At least from the Nextopia side, that was a kind of, we put all of our eggs in one basket there. Anybody that's seen the three booths and 50 people wearing Teletubby green walking around will know that we went pretty hard with that show. But it's obviously changed, and I think, to be honest, it was gearing towards smaller, more intimate shows anyway, more focused meetups and of that type of stuff. And now we're just doing it virtually. I mean, it doesn't quite match the human stuff, but I think people have got very creative with the virtual conferences, the virtual hangouts, happy hours, all sorts of stuff going on. So if you're talking silver linings, there's been a hell of a lot of creativity from marketing departments across this industry, trying to reallocate resources and keep engagement up, and not trying to whitewash people with COVID stories all the time.
Yeah, so I'm going to pull it back one last time, I hope, back to to the main topic of site search. I did have a couple of things that I wanted to be sure to ask, because I know that in the Magento community, Elasticsearch, I mean, with Magento 1, Solar was built into Magento Enterprise Edition, now known as Magento Commerce. And then, Elastic became more of the standard. And, at some point, I'd have to think about exactly when on the calendar, but Magento made, in recent versions of Magento 2, Elastic available to open source users as more of a default option as well. Have you seen any of that have an impact in how you operate, or in how the market looks at something like Searchspring?
Sure.
Is it competitive, or does it lead more people in your direction in one way or another?
Yeah, I mean, let's call a spade a spade. Elasticsearch is a vast improvement on what was on Magento 1. I think a lot of people were happy to see that and search had been a problem for Magento for years. I don't think anyone at Magento would hide away from the fact that they relied on third parties to help merchants with that. And it's a great platform, Elasticsearch. I mean, it's very, while it's a search platform and Searchspring is obviously providing search as well, it's very much chalk and cheese, and they both have their use cases, and it really depends on what's the best fit. I think they're a great company. They're infinitely scalable and customizable. It just really comes down to what you want to concentrate on and what's important to you as a merchant. Elastic is essentially an open source platform. Well, it's not essentially an open source platform. It is an open source platform. But it essentially allows you to build the search experience that you want and customize the search that you want to do on site. Whereas Searchspring is a little different in the fact that it has a lot of the stuff that's built out already in terms of relevancy algorithms and what we call IntelliSuggest in terms of being able to promote high converting items and adding contextual search layers and things like that. And it really comes down to what you want to be concentrating on. I think often, depending on how much resource you have at your company, Elasticsearch can take up all of your time and all of your resources. And it really depends on whether you want to be a search expert selling X product online, or whether you want to be the X product online expert that has a search tool. And again, I think
I'll equate it to what we do, that we know anybody can go and spin up an AWS account and, try to throw their Magento site in there. But when it comes to maintaining it, monitoring it, managing it, securing it, optimizing it, the whole 9 yards of what we do, very hard for someone else to be able to bring the same kind of value at the same kind of cost that we're able to. In many cases, they're just not going to get the results that they're looking for out of their own resource, or if they do, it's going to come at a much higher price. So,
sure.
So I'm going to draw a logical line between
and I think
between the two.
Yeah, that's really the case, and I mean there's benefits to both, obviously, and there's a control there, and you can build out pretty much what you want there. But it really comes down to, do you want to be the Elasticsearch expert, or do you want to pay someone that is an Elasticsearch expert to keep this maintained, because it does need to be maintained, or do you want to be concentrating on your business more as a whole and allow us to be the experts in search? But again, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, we feel that Searchspring, and again, the name doesn't help necessarily, but the Searchspring is part of a broader suite of tools that allows merchants to have power over the full merchandising capabilities of their store, and offer business logic and be able to bring business logic to the store and concentrate really on that user experience, rather than just getting really into the weeds on what search is doing. And
does anyone own conversionspring.com? I think I'm going to buy it. And since you guys are rebranding anyway, maybe I'm going to sell it to you for...
Yeah, so I mean, search is obviously a core component, and we do it very well. And a lot of it is done it makes sense and it works. But really, where we're focusing is taking search as the core component and building out and being able to offer you a more robust suite that allows you to basically provide search and merchandising and just general user experience logic, provide logic to your store site-wide. And search is a key part of that. It obviously converts very highly, but there's a lot more to it than search. And I think that's really the key differentiator, is really where you want to allocate resources and what you're trying to do with the site.
Conversionspring.com is taken. Shoot. I almost had it.
Maybe we got that one up a little bit.
Maybe I didn't check the who is yet. So staying on track in terms of site search and navigation and conversion optimization and things that a platform like yours brings to the table. If you're an end user and you're not ready to have a conversation with a sales team, I mean, obviously, your team, I'm sure, just like ours, is happy to offer a free consult and take a look at some data and provide some feedback and make some suggestions and recommendations that people can do as they see fit with. We look at site speed and security and loads testing and all sorts of things that we can do. I'm guessing that your team will put a site through the ringer, but if they're not up to that point yet and they want to take a little bit of a look at their site in order to at least get a feel for, at a cursory level, are they getting an A or are they getting an F in their overall navigation? What would you suggest that they take a look at? Are there a few things that are usually easy to get at?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, obviously, if you're a SearchSpring client, we have an array of in-depth reporting tools that give you a lot of information. But there is stuff that you can still look at if you're looking at, well, how important is this to my store, and what am I scoring? Like you said, one is pretty obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people don't have it turned on and don't look at it. Is GA e-commerce tracking is turned on, and it should be able to provide you information on how many searches are coming through compared to non-searches and how that's converting. What we traditionally will find is that a smaller portion of people will be using the search bar, but they convert at a far higher rate. It's just from a logical standpoint, people that are searching for something usually already have the intent to buy. And so you really want to make sure that the search is working that way. And that's why it converts so highly. But beyond that, I think really you want to look at X number of search terms, whether it's your top 10 search terms, top 20 search terms, top 100 search terms. And from a quantitative side, are those results relevant? Are those results converting? And you can look at all of this through GA. But then also, again, everybody is, or the end users are usually the experts in their industry. And you want to kind of put a qualitative thing over the top of it as well. And are these results, do these results make sense from my standpoint? Like, if I search for red shoes because it's a top 10 search term, do the red shoes that appear make sense as suggestions for me? Not only are they red and are they shoes, but are they items that we would offer in if someone asked us suggestions in person, and are these going to make sense from our business standpoint? And so there's a lot you can look at. And then I guess you also need to look at a more kind of wide look at how much resource am I allocating here? How much time am I spending editing databases, adding synonym rules, redirecting search terms to category pages, instead of actually concentrating on my business as a whole? And maybe that is an indicator that, okay, now I'm in a position where I need to look at a more robust solution that can kind of take that power away, or take that power of search and work with it. And maybe if I'm spending a lot of time having to make manual adjustments to my databases, to my product information, to synonyms, then it's time to look at something like SearchSpring, just because of a pure resource allocation standpoint. But also, obviously, if your search queries are high and they're not converting too well, maybe you want to look into kind of deeper why they're doing so.
Yeah, you started talking about Google Analytics, and I remembered having written an article for your team. I just, Googled and found I wrote an article. We're coming up on the 5-year anniversary, 2015, on the Nextopia blog on analyzing Magento's site search data through the Magento admin. I'm sure there's probably another one of those out there somewhere,
for sure.
Google Analytics. So
yeah.
I guess that, in that sense, the data always tells the story. And, it's interesting that I've always found that in a site that's got an effective site search, you're going to see the conversion rate when people use the site search box go way up, because they know what they're looking for. They're searching for it. They're finding it and they're buying it. Versus people that didn't search and might not have been as decisive about what they needed. And if it's not working that way, usually, that's one of the fastest tip-offs that something is going wrong, something is not quite meeting the need or the expectation. So this has been a really interesting dive down a few different avenues with you today. Pandemics and mergers and e-commerce best practices. Anything new on the horizon before we wrap it up? Any anything coming down the pike that you can give us any sneak peeks at, or any?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely not we're not stopping or slowing down in terms of what we're trying to do just because of what's happening now. Like I said, I think a major focus of us right now that we've kind of gone through the initial stage of the merger and announcing it and doing all the cleanup that comes with it is we're really doubling down on the product itself. There's a lot on the roadmap. The Will and his team are very clear and transparent about what's down there on the roadmap. So, I mean, from now till 2022, I think they have a roadmap built out. That's obviously could change based on market trends and what have you. But I think some of the big things we're looking at right now is being able to offer more segmented merchandising. A/B testing, I know, has been a big discussion point through the bet cycles. And then really focusing on that one-to-one personalization and making sure that you can offer even more tailored experiences on a user-by-user perspective. And there's plenty more down the line. If people ever want to know, we're pretty open about it. It's usually available. But that's really what we're doing is we're doubling down on the products, and we're doubling down on the customer success as well, and working with our clients to really enhance what they're doing. I think that's a major differentiator. It's often weird for a tech company to say that a big differentiator is the people, but
I think more of us should be saying it because, it's absolutely the secret sauce to any of these companies, that as much as we're known for things that don't involve people, at least visibly, it's all, the people aspect is what's allowing, tech companies to grow and thrive and meet expectations and have great customer service and support. And without those sorts of things, there's nothing. And that's probably one of the number one sources of new business for JetRails. It's folks that have outgrown a less managed host, somewhere where they couldn't get what they needed or effectively or without pulling out too much of their hair.
And I mean, I think that's a big thing for us too. I mean, you're not just getting the Searchspring platform; you're getting a customer success team manager that has got experience with vast array of clients and of search. You've got integrators that have been doing this 10 plus years. You've got partner people that have been doing it for multiple years as well. So you're also getting a team of people to your disposal to help. Ultimately, you'll have the same goal of trying to help you succeed and build your business to another level.
Yeah. So I really appreciate all of your time today. As all of our chats are, this was fantastic. I'll ask what you were drinking once we once we nah. I know what you're drinking already. I don't have to ask. Any final words or parting thoughts before we wrap it for the day?
No, I think it's been great. I know that we've been trying to do this for a long time. I've known you and Tom and the team for 3 or 4 years now. While we don't get to spend usually this time of year, I expect to see a lot of you at a trade show. Now I get to see a lot of you on a Zoom call. So we always find a way this time of year, I guess. But it's been great to be on, and I'm glad we finally got to do this.
Awesome. Well, for our listeners, thank you as always for tuning in. Feel free to rate us, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts or watch the videos. We're on YouTube, Facebook, at JetRails. We are available on social media, on LinkedIn and Twitter, where you can let us know what you think and make suggestions, put in special requests. We'd love to hear from you, regardless of how we can help or what your thoughts are. As always, I wish you, health and safety with, what's going on out there, and very happy selling. Thanks all.